Hello and welcome to the show. When it comes to truly bonkers British cars, it is difficult to get much crazier than the Ultima Evo. This thing has 1,020 horsepower and a car that weighs just a smidge over 2,000 pounds. That is a ridiculous, stupendous power to weight ratio, all in a car that is, well, very cheap indeed. Despite Forza 7's wonky pricing of cars, this thing is about $250,000. Truth be told, it should be far less than that. In terms of value for performance, it's very, very, very difficult to get better than this. After all, 0 to 60, if you can somehow manage to find the traction, will come and go in about 2.3 seconds. It'll be doing 100 in under 5, top out over 240. That is an awful, awful lot of speed. Although, truth be told, you put a lot of power in a light car, and sure, you can get those sort of figures. The tough bit is to get the car to go around the corners. You would expect, looking at this vehicle, for it to have all the precision, all the elegance, if you like, of, well, Jeremy Clarkson. To be like trying to, well, drive a Saturn V rocket with nothing more than a steering wheel and somehow expect it to get around a corner. But that's not the case. Now, I would never dare say the Ultima is an easy car to drive. It really isn't. However, with a little bit of caution, you can take a lot of speed around a circuit. Yes, the rear wing looks like it was something that was found in Halford's catalogue and stuck on the back of the car. There is no fancy movable aero. The front splitter is barely even visible most of the time. It doesn't look like it would be an ultra fast car through the corners. But with a bit of care, you can take surprisingly large amounts of corner speed, and then when you have got round the corners, you will then be going very, very fast down the straights. The brakes are also fantastic. While you might be having to brake earlier in this car than some other vehicles, most of that is because you are going so much faster into a braking zone. The brakes themselves are very good indeed. However, the Ultima is not alone in being a bonkers British car. There certainly are a fair few incredibly fast British track day cars. The question is, which one would be the fastest? While we know the Ultima is likely to be the fastest down the straights, could any of the other contenders get near to it over the course of an entire lap? So we start with a lap at the Yas Marina South layout, the hot lap circuit of choice, which I have been using. We have the Ultima Evo, the Mclaren P1 GTR, the Radical RXC, and the Aston Martin Vulcan. Down towards turn 1, the Ultima is going to lead the way with that sheer brute force from that car. However, through the technical section, the Radical would pull the time back, pop out just a fraction ahead of that Ultima. The McLaren very, very close behind the Vulcan, having a bit of a tough day so far. We're only halfway through the lap as we head through the double sweeper. It is incredibly close between the Ultima, the McLaren, the Radical. They are all just about the same. The Ultima struggling a little bit with this tight, twisty section. The Radical needs to make up as much speed as it can, as much lap time as it can through, because there's now only one more quarter to go in 2 straights for that Ultima's huge straight line speed. The McLaren, of course, still very much in this. The Aston Martin, not quite so much as they round the final corner. The Radical is ahead, but only just. The Ultima's acceleration is humongous. The McLaren quicker than the Radical as well. Down the straight as they shoot up towards the line. It's ridiculously close between 3 of them. The Vulcan a little bit further down the road. And incredible. I've done a few of these sort of multicam laps, and nothing has ever been quite as close as those 3 cars. Around the Yas circuit, it would be the Radical that would go fastest, but only just over that Ultima. A 102.9 for the Radical, the first car to lap this circuit under 1 minute 3. The Ultima in second, the McLaren a couple of tenths down in third. Interestingly, the Vulcan couldn't even beat the GTA Spano. The Aston Martin Vulcan that is, okay, it is the lowest PI, Forza's rating system for the cars here, but it isn't too far down on the Radicals and so on. It's, yeah, struggled. I mean, it's only 0.3 of a second faster than the Zenvo. It's only a second and a bit faster than the Dodge Viper ACR. It's not a great time from the Aston Martin. I mean, the likes of, the McLaren and so on are a second and a half ahead of that GTA Spano, as we would expect. But, not a great showing from the Vulcan. Now, of course, Yas Marina, the south layout that we use, is a very technical circuit. It is always likely to favour the Radical that little bit more. There's not too many straights for a car like the Ultima to really excel at. And when you see what this car can do when it comes to a racing situation, it is utterly remarkable. McLaren P1s do not stand a chance against the Ultima going down the straights. Now, admittedly, the Ultimas are quite the handful. Ignore the slight tyre smoke. The Forza replays are being derpy as per usual. Really, a few cars have got stuck random smoking. It honestly isn't the Ultima spinning its wheels all the way. I mean, it could, if you wanted it to, spin the wheels all the way around a lap here. You just wouldn't be able to keep up with the P1 GTR if you were doing such a feat. As soon as you get to any sort of straight in an Ultima, as soon as you get to the slightest bit of straight and you can get the power down, it pulls on absolutely everything. Just nothing stands a chance of keeping up with this car down the straights. And then we get to the corners, and yeah, the P1 is fractionally quicker, but it's not fast enough. It's not fast enough to make up the time that it loses when we come to these acceleration zones, and the Ultima is just gone. The Ultima just flies away down the straight. Now, we did come across a couple of issues while racing around this Silverstone GP layout. The McLarens were struggling a bit, the P1s with some understeer. Also, we had issues with big issues with curbs. These are very fast race cars, very low race cars, and it turns out if you run across the curbs a little bit too much, the game will have you, and you will be spun around, and sometimes when you are following cars incredibly closely, that will, take out the pair of you. Not much that you can do about, I say not much you can do, stay off the curbs basically, but we weren't quite aware how vicious they were going to be. If you touch the curbs with the cars at the wrong point, it will just suddenly snap. There is absolutely nothing that you can do. During this particular race, one of the P1s was being hounded by a couple of Ultimas trying to find ways past as we head up towards Maggots and Beckett's. Also, Forza replays terrible interior cameras for some cars, or for cars that aren't the player's own replay. Yeah, don't ask. Through Maggots and Beckett's for this group. Unfortunately for the poor P1, it would give the tiniest tap on the back of the lead Ultima in this group, and that would be enough to upset that one. It wasn't a good first round for the McLarens. They didn't have a particularly fun time. It's one of the things how racing can go sometimes. At the front of this particular field, my Ultima was hounding a Radical, trying my very best to find a way past. And it very much was a case of the Radical's going to be quicker than me around the corners. I know there is nothing that I can do about that through the turns, but as soon as you get to the straights, the Ultima will soar past. So all I have to do is just stay close enough. You have to stay close enough for the Radical. Don't even necessarily fight too aggressively through some of the corners. Just focus on your own race and make sure you are close enough when you get to those straights as we fight our way through the final corner here. The Radical, I know, is likely to pull away. I get in trouble with a bit of sideways on the curb. The Radical gets some understeer across the curb. Yeah, it was mean to every car. It wasn't just the McLarens that got in trouble. Every car had issues on those curbs. Towards turn one, I fire my Ultima up the inside. Can't quite get an overtake done, but I can compromise the Radical a little bit through there. Having to, park my car towards the inside. The Radical has to take a wider line. Slows him down a little bit through the corners. Can keep me closer. Puts me closer when we come to the next straight, although the Radical will be flat out easy around this left-hander. It is not easy in the Ultima. It's rather sketchy at best through that corner and not quite flat out, although once you are on the straight again, we'll come soaring past that Radical up the inside. Again, I know it's going to be difficult to make that pass stick, and sure enough, the RXC has got more than enough grip to make it stick around the outside, but I've slowed him down. I'm closer now that we are coming to this straight, now that we are coming to an area in which the Ultima is strong. I actually catch up so much. Like, it catches you out just how fast the closing speed is between this Ultima and just about every other car. It's absurd. I got up the inside into the old turn one. The Radical has had the run, had the momentum on the outside, but then we came to a straight and then we ran away. And it was a little the Radical could manage. Through Maggots and Beckett's we go, and the Radical will catch up briefly through here, and then we go soaring off down the straight, and we'll be yeah, relatively long gone, while the two Ultimas in third and fourth were fighting for position. There is nothing quite as spectacular, though, as seeing it from on board. So this is a rear-facing camera from my Ultima. I think this was a slightly different lap, as we were still continuing the fight with the Radicals. So relatively straightforward, you know, past coming into Maggots and Beck. Can put a bit of a gap on the way into here. Now the Radical is pushing bloody hard. You can tell by the amount the back of that car is moving around. It'll close right up to the back as we head onto the main straight, and bye-bye Radical. Now that RXC is not a slow car. That is not a slow car at all in a straight line, but compared to the... it's just gone. You can barely see it by the time we get to the end of the straight. Compared to a normal supercar, that Radical would do surprisingly well down the straights. But against the Ultima, this is not a normal supercar. It's such a monster. I mean, I knew how quick the Ultima is, but just seeing it against these cars reinforces how fast that thing is in a straight line. The Vulcans didn't have a fun time. This, a second race, trying to give the McLarens a bit more of a chance. This time the Radicals managed to bounce off the curb and spin each other out, so yeah. The Vulcans we didn't see much of, primarily because, well, two of the cars weren't showing up in the replays, but also because by the end of lap 1 they were at the back of the train and long gone. They didn't stand a chance around Silverstone. Through the corners they were okay, but they lacked so much in terms of straight line speed and acceleration. They just couldn't keep up. They were just a completely different class to the vehicles that were at the front. A shame for the Vulcan, but it's just not fast enough against this competition. Again, a different P1 against the pair of Ultimas down the back straight. The Silk Cut Ultima will get past, although it's a bit sketchy into the braking zones at the end of the straight. Does manage to get it all stopped in time. And again, crazy acceleration down towards this final corner, but it isn't easy getting the Ultimas through some of these turns. If you're a little bit too aggressive, you can get the cars sliding very, very easily indeed. Got to be incredibly careful in the lower gear, second, third gear, trying to go to full throttle. Chances are you are just going to spin the wheels, and they do slide very, very easily through these corners. But when you've got so much acceleration on tap, the McLarens just couldn't deal with it. The P1s just could not deal with the speed that the Ultimas could get up to, and the Ultimas could really hold their own through the corners. And to me, that is still one of the most impressive things about the Evo here, is that despite the fact it has got such a ludicrous amount of power, it should be nigh on undrivable, but it isn't. Now, I thought about trying to go too wide into Maggots and Beckett's. At the end of the day, that sort of manoeuvre is fairly high risk, especially when you're in a very difficult-to-drive car. Much better just to back off of that one. Well, live to fight another day. No point in having a big crash through there, because, again, I know where I'm going to be able to make the time up as we soar down the back straight. Now, this time around, I get things a little bit wrong in the braking zone. To get the tiniest of bobbles across a bump and end up binging off the door of the P1. Sends me out a little bit too wide. I lose a place, dropping back to a third in this particular race. But it wouldn't be too long until I was back on the tail of the leader, especially with the car ahead, just understeering that bit wide. Tried to carry too much speed through the penultimate turn, ends up across the AstroTurf. Once you end up on the AstroTurf, there's very little grip in these cars, although it's better than being on the random spin curbs that that you get. As I said, it was a lap and a half before I was back on the tail of the lead P1, and I was bringing a friend with me in this one. We were bringing the other Ultimas up towards the front of the field. The old sort of start-finish straight we went around once more. I don't think the P1 quite realised just how fast I was going to catch up to the back of him. It was up the inside into the next corner. I'm not necessarily expecting the pass to work through there again. I know the P1's going to have the speed on the exit, but it was just, again, slow the McLaren down. I actually misjudged my car, get a bit of wheel spin, almost end up across the grass. The tiniest bit too much throttle in this car, and you will spin the wheels, you'll wiggle across the road, and I ended up trying to kind of catch it, correct it with a wheel on the grass, but we did keep it all together. And then as we head on to the longest of straights, the P1 is a very, very fast car in a straight line, and the Ultima makes it look ordinary. The Ultima makes the P1 GTR look ordinary down the straights. It's just ridiculous. And having now got past the P1, I'd bring the other Ultima with me. In terms of overall lap time around this circuit, the Ultimas were nearly 2 seconds a lap faster. Once running in clean air, I could go 2 seconds a lap faster than the P1s. We were in the 156s. The P1s and the Radicals were in the high 57s, 58s and so on. The Vulcans struggled to get below 2 minutes around here. I don't think they did get below 2 minutes at all. Yeah, the poor Aston Martins did struggle. The Ultimas themselves, well, they had curb issues also. Well, I can't show you the Radicals having curb issues because, well, the cars that did weren't actually in the replays. Fun times. One of the Ultimas here towards the end of this race just ran a little bit wide, weird on the curb, and, well, that'll be spat sideways. Not a good place to be spat sideways. A very fast part of the circuit. Tried to get out of the way of the McLarens. Couldn't quite get it going to a sensible point. It's all of that. Yeah, the Ultimas were unbelievably fast at Silverstone. However, we move on to a slightly different test of the cars. We came to the Brands Hatch circuit. Now, the challenge in this was to carry as much speed as possible through turn 1. The rest of the lap didn't matter. It was all about maintaining as much speed as we possibly could through the first corner. I would be looking at the telemetry and measuring the lowest points, the lowest miles an hour that the cars registered, making it through turn 1. So this, irrelevant about your straight line speed, your acceleration, this is all about how brave dare you be through the corner and how much grip, how much speed can your car carry. And importantly, we were not allowed to run more that way. We had to keep 2 wheels on the track. We had to keep 2 wheels to the right-hand side of the white line at turn 1. If you ran over the curb, your run would not count. There were some cars pushing it very hard. Now, we've been 3 attempts each. The first attempt for the Silk Cut Ultima, a little bit too much. Just a smidge over the white line, but that run wouldn't count. I would get a neater run behind, but not quite as fast for me. Now, this is a challenge that we expected the Ultimas to struggle a little bit. It's a nasty corner, turn 1 here at Brands, and the Ultimas are not easy cars to drive, which, sure enough, a little bit too late on the brakes, couldn't quite bring this one under control and going skating off into the gravel there. That would very much be a be a run invalidated for that car. Now, it is a challenge that perhaps the Vulcan would fare better at. Doesn't have to worry about straight line speed, about acceleration and so on for this car. It's all about maintaining that speed through the turn. And again, unfortunately, there were 3 Vulcans taking part. I only have 1 working in the replay, so only 1 that I can view telemetry of. I apologise to the other guys. Forza replays for you. Reason why we haven't done one of these showdowns yet, and probably won't for a while. The Radicals, again, another car we would expect to see doing well. They make all of their lap time through the corners, in the braking zones and so on. A challenge in which they are likely to excel. They've got the grip to do it. And while this Silver Radical was pretty much on the limit on, I think that was his first run through there, yeah, the Radicals were able to take a huge amount of speed. It was an interesting challenge because you drive the corner a little bit different. It's not about ultimate lap speed. It might not even be the fastest way to get through the corner, but you are, yeah, trying to keep your speed up through the turn. So it's no good being sort of slow into a corner, fast out of it, if your miles an hour drops too slow. Trying to find that very, very fine line, that judgment point to get it perfect is, yeah, challenging in cars as fast as this at a very, very nasty turn 1. I was playing it relatively safe in my first couple of runs. There were some interesting alternate strategies going. Most of us were going for run at turn 1 at racing speed, get on the brakes as late as you dare, and turn in. Some cars, like the yellow and purple one, were cruising more down the start-finish straight and then kind of rolling through turn 1. An interesting and slightly cleverer strategy in some ways, because you don't have to worry about slowing the car down so much, as it's only about the lowest speed the car falls to, rather than, again, how fast you're actually getting around the corner. You can kind of keep your speed up a little bit. When it came to the final runs, cars were being a little bit braver. The Mclaren P1 clobbers the curb on the inside. That won't count. Turned in a fraction too soon. And the inside curb is nasty here. It will actually fire cars up onto 2 wheels, and you do that, you're going to likely be carted out wide on the exit. Wasn't a particularly fun time for the green Radical. Exactly what happens to his car. You hit the curb too hard, end up on 2 wheels, get fired out into the gravel trap on the exit. Not where you want to be going, particularly The Ultima, well, this particular one was continuing to try different strategies into the first quarter. Again, sort of more cruising into a turn one. This time, though, carrying a bit too much speed, trying to better his previous runs, and it was asking too much of the car, trying to maintain too high a speed. It's unspectacular, but has gone wandering off into the gravel trap, and I would follow suit. I did go a little bit too fast. Trying to, like, the difference between sort of 3 or 4 miles an hour difference is very difficult to judge when you're going full racing speed into turn one. And if you're 4 miles an hour too fast here, that's the sort of thing you're going to end up doing with your car. I buried it good and proper in the gravel trap. I gave a go, and I had done 2 clean runs previously, so I thought, well, I'd throw the car at the course to see what would happen. The Radicals, perhaps unsurprisingly, or the other 2 Radicals, the green one had a poor day, but the other 2 were remarkably consistent, and this is a challenge that we would expect to see them do well at through the first quarter. Keep it off the curb, and yeah, they can carry very, very good speed down here. So, to the leaderboard for our speeds, it would be victory for the RCX. 90 miles an hour held through turn one. The same amount of speed held by the Ultima. However, the Ultima's 2 other runs were not counted, so we kind of go on the second fastest run. The winning RCX did 90 miles an hour, 89 and 89. That is some remarkable consistency through turn one. The RCX would also come home in third with 88 miles an hour. I could only manage 86 through turn one, a little bit too much speed on that final run. I think I know I could do a little bit more than 86, but I think it was 94, 95 I tried throwing it in on the final run, and that was way too much for the Ultima to deal with. The Vulcan would end up in 5th. Interestingly, some redemption for the Vulcan in 5th, beats all 3 of the P1s. Remarkably consistent between all of the P1s, and I think the P1's tendency to understeer caused them trouble here at turn 1. They are a little bit naturally understeery, and that turn 1 is not an easy corner. Of course, we now move on to a drag race, and it wouldn't be a British showdown without a little bit of drizzle to contend with. Again, we have got fun replay issues, not all the cars appearing. However, there is at least one of each brand here. The 3 Ultimas lined up alongside the 3 McLarens. The Radical gets a fantastic start here in the rain. The P1s, though, get their power down. They start scampering away. The Vulcan is long gone in the distance behind, However, once the Ultimas are hooked up, there is nothing the McLarens can do about the Evos. You can just about see there's a Formula E car next to some tyre bundles to mark the finish line there. Once the Ultimas have got their power down, and they can't get their power down until 3rd or 4th gear. However, once they do, there is nothing the McLarens can do. It's an incredibly close race between the McLarens, as you would expect. Incredibly close race between these 3 vehicles. It is the black car that gets the slightly better launch. The white and orange a little bit better secondary phase. The black car slightly managing to bring it back further down the run, but here comes those Ultimas. They just go soaring past. It's incredible speed, even in terrible conditions. I mean, we deliberately made it challenging for the Ultimas. Even then, they will annihilate everything down the straight. This was from the finish line car. Yeah, it was close. It was close because the Ultimas take so long to get traction, to get up to speed. But once they do, thank God. Yeah, very close between us. Two victors with the Ultimas. Then followed by the McLarens, the white and yellow car. A little bit slower off the lines, a little bit sluggish getaway. And that would drop him behind his teammates. You can just about see the third of the Ultimas in the background. He couldn't quite beat the P1s. Just a sluggish start for that car. The Radical wasn't too bad. Again, considering we know the straight line speed is going to be that car's weakness, it's considerably down on power. It's at 458 horsepower compared to sort of 900, 800 horsepower of the cars around it. Oh, and there's the Vulcan. Yeah, the Radical does still beat the Vulcan. Vulcan might have 800 horsepower, but that's not enough to beat the Radicals. We then move on to the Nought to 100 to Nought test. So not only is this testing launch, acceleration, you've also got braking to contend with, all in the wet. I was going first with the Ultima. Unfortunately, again, with the replay issues, I'm having to use the live footage from this one. It's not the best film because I'd never intended on using the live footage, but there we go. My run was pretty solid, actually. A lot of short shifting going on in this car to try and get it off the line with minimal amount of wheel spin. However, the white and purple car would do a fraction better. We do manage to kind of move around. It's very difficult to get these things to stay in a straight line. very difficult indeed in all of this. So yeah, I managed to kind of come across a little bit more than I perhaps should have done. The Vulcan comes soaring past. He can't quite get stopped. I should also point out the other white Ultima was using ABS, which will not help in this particular instance. You did also have to slightly navigate around me, which will go some way to explaining the big gap between us. Also, just getting the Ultimas off the line is rather a difficult thing. I apologise for my poor lack of filming skills here, not watching for the next or the first of the P1s to appear. However, as you might expect with their superior traction off the line, the P1s would be able to beat our Ultimas, and the P1s would have a very, very sort of good cluster, if you like, the most consistent of the cars, with the white and orange one coming in last, not quite able to pull it up in time as fast as the other vehicles. However, all three would stop quicker than the Ultimas, but the Ultimas were pretty close. The Radicals won't quite have the acceleration of our Ultimas, however they do have traction on their side and, again, phenomenal brakes in those cars. That being said, they couldn't manage, even in conditions like this, even in conditions that really, really shouldn't suit the Ultimas. The Radicals couldn't do it faster. The Radicals couldn't get stopped quicker than at least two of the Ultimas. Unfortunately, when I go to the replay mode to do the flyby with this, we don't see we don't see the Vulcans, we don't see a couple of the Radicals. However, we can see all of the McLarens. Yeah, it was close. It was very close indeed between that group of cars. The sort of bluey, blacky, and yellow car would just sneak that one not far until you come across the Ultimas. Impressive performance, very impressive performance considering the adverse weather conditions, and to beat all of the Radicals as well, or certainly two of the Ultimas to beat all of the Radicals. It's a damn fine showing for those cars. We then do have to go a fair way further down to find the other of the Ultimas. Unfortunately, I don't actually know if this one did beat the two Vulcans. The two Vulcans were very close together. None of the replays we have shows the Vulcans. It's horrendous to try and deal with, but there we go. Now, as far as conclusions go to this, there really can only be one winner, and that has got to be the Ultima Evo. While, yeah, when it comes to a very technical lap, the Radical will give it a damn good run for its money, and so will the Mclaren P1. When it comes to a very, very technical circuit, the Radical will be the slightly faster car, certainly be competitive. However, as soon as you go to a full-size circuit, as soon as you go to a circuit that has any sort of straight, the Ultima's absurd acceleration, otherworldly acceleration, is too much for anything else to deal with, and it isn't that slow when it comes, it really isn't that slow when it comes to the corners. Hell, at Brands Hatch, it beats the McLarens. They beat the McLaren P1. It isn't necessarily easy to get it around the corners at those speeds, but it can do it. So yeah, the Ultima has got to be the victor here, and I haven't even said the most impressive fact of all during this. You see, all of the cars here were run stock, completely stock, the spec that they come. The Ultima isn't even on racing slicks. Both the P1 and the Vulcan are on full race tyres. Neither of them are road legal cars. However, the Ultima is very much road legal, and its tyre compound is considerably worse than the McLaren. The way Forza works, you have race tyres, which of course are your full slicks. You have sport tyres, which are probably the barely road legal slicks. You have street tyres that are better than normal tyres, but yeah, still, you know, fairly road legal tyres. The Ultima was on street tyres. It was 2 compounds worse than the Mclaren P1 GTR, and yet when it came to Brands Hatch, it could take turn 1 faster, or it could take kind of maintain momentum, keep that speed up. That is an incredible accomplishment. The Radical was also not on full race slicks. That was on sport tyres. Slightly better compound than you get on the Ultima, but yeah. To be going that fast, to be able to carry that speed through the corners that the Ultima did, all things considered, that is a hell of a chassis, a hell of a car to be able to do that. It's a ridiculous vehicle. It really, really is. It's not easy to drive, certainly nowhere near as easy to drive as the Radical. The Radical is a very, very good fun car to throw around a circuit. I thoroughly enjoyed driving it around Yas Marina. I mean, the McLaren P1 GTR is not a slow car, do not get me wrong here. Do not get me wrong at all. It's a bit of an understeery car. I quite like the way it drives. It works for my driving style. It won't be to everyone's taste. Sure, you could probably tune that out with some tweaking with the setup and so on, but if you spent the amount of time tuning that car to get it to stop being, well, stop handling like that, I bet you could also, if you knew what you were doing, make the Radical, make the Ultima even faster. So, yeah, the Ultima has to win this. It wins it fairly comfortably, if I am honest. It won't be the easiest car to drive here, but when you get things right, it is the best British track car there is. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.